On a daily basis, when you meet people and you ask them how they're doing, what's the most common response you receive? You say, hey, how's it going? And typically they'll say, Alhamdulillah, I'm good. And then there's what else? What do they say about life? What's their typical description? I'm busy. How many of you hear that? How many of you said that or say that? No, right. You're not lying probably either. Like I'm sure many, if not most of us have quite busy and occupied lives. Now, there's a story about a man, it's an anecdote, about a man who immigrates to Canada from a different country. And one of the challenges when you move to a country is learning the language. So he's trying to learn English. So he learns when you meet people, you say hi and you ask them, how are you doing? And he got to a point where he thought busy meant good. By the amount of people that you would respond to his question, how are you doing? And they'd be like, I'm so busy. He thought it must mean I'm good. Do you understand? I want to start today's talk on reflection by talking a little bit about busyness, talking a little bit about hurry. Because if we're going to talk about reflection, contemplation, we need to address the hurried nature of our lives and the busyness that we experience. A person's leisure time reflected their status. It means they could afford to just be constantly hanging out. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, if you have a friend, you ever heard this? The friend on Tuesday afternoon who's posting some really interesting place. What do we think? Let's be honest. What do we think about that person? What's our first assumption? He has nothing to do. Yeah. Jobless, right? Job market hit the dude hard. And so that's why he is boating out at Lake Simcoe or something. Right? We have these thoughts about people. In the past, it was a status symbol that somebody just had so much time to relax and to really do the things that they enjoy doing. Meanwhile, the times that we live in, your busyness says something about your status, which would explain why people on Monday morning will post a picture of their office, right? Monday morning, or the view, and the post like downtown Toronto. Do you understand? And it's a status symbol. Think about this, if we're honest. There's even studies been done about this. So one of the studies, what they did was they basically asked people their opinions in terms of social status regarding three people. It was done in America. So Peapod. Apparently Peapod would be like your, what's the food delivery service you get here where they deliver meals? No, not Uber Eats, but like weekly meals. Okay, halal meals, right? Yeah, we're in ISNA, so we got to talk about halal meals, right? The halal delivery service. So Peapod was a version of that. So the question was, if one person, their daily or weekly groceries comes from Peapod, another person gets their groceries from Whole Foods, and the third person gets it from Trader Joe's. What does that say about their status socially? Consistently, people rated the person whose groceries come from Peapod to be higher socially. Why? The assumption was, if you are ordering like the groceries to your door every single week, number one, it means you're so busy, so you're probably super important. And then you're super rich that you can afford to pay for that, even though The point was made in the study that the groceries at Whole Foods would come to the same cost. And yet people said, well, hey, if you're getting meals delivered to you, you must be of a higher status. That's very interesting because it means we value people and look up to them based on things like being able to order your meals for the week rather than the meaning and the connection you find behind cooking together, cooking for your family, cooking with your kids. Like, what's more meaningful? The person who has time to do that, who prioritizes that? Or the person who works so much, they don't have time to do that, so they got to order meals. And interestingly, as a society, we seem to value people who are able to order that food in and may not spend time with their family. There's another interesting one. Another study they did was about somebody who walks into a room wearing like headphones or earphones, right? Like the assumption is they're probably listening to music. And another person walks in wearing like a Bluetooth thing. Do you know like the earpieces for like taking calls? And like who is of a higher social status? And everybody consistently went, the person with the Bluetooth. It's a social status. Well, this person, it must mean they always need to be on call, which means they're a big shot, which means they're constantly busy, which means that they're very important. We equate busyness with something about your value. That's a very interesting idea. Busy people are perceived as competent, ambitious. Now, this is something to think about because this might explain why we spread ourselves thin. How many of you at some point in your lives can, remember where you spread yourself too thin? Which is interesting. Why did you do that? What led you to often neglect your own health to do all these things that were beyond what you could handle in a healthy way? It's the pursuit of, I'm so busy. And people will share with you what they're busy with too, right? So they're not just busy, they're busy with XYZ. That's nice to know, right? Are we sharing what we're busy with because we want to share our lives with other people, or to let them know about how important we are and the important things we do? This is a tough one. It's a tough one, right? And so I want to now turn to the idea of hurry. How many of you would say that the pace at which your life moves could be described as hurried? Yeah? I think it's very common. I think when you meet people, you see people, they're just rushing. And this is important. This is an important point to talk about. Some have argued that hurry is the greatest detriment to a spiritual life. Hurry. We think about like fitna. We think like this haram and that haram thing. These are all detriments and obstacles to spirituality. Sure, they definitely are. But we know about them that they're haram, we shouldn't do them. The one that's actually not haram, but yet still diminishes significantly our spiritual life, is hurry. And you might say, well, no, Sheikh, like, I'm hurried, but I still pray 5 times a day. Yeah, but what's the quality of those 5 prayers? When you're like praying and thinking, I got a meeting after this. When you're reciting Quran, but it's just to check it off. Boom, done, move on. Because I got important things to do, right? What did that say about the Quran? But you understand? Hurried. And you know what's really sad, is that one of the tragedies, I believe, is we as a society have become accustomed to living in very unhealthy ways. In like suboptimal ways. We're accustomed to it. It's normal. How many people get good sleep? Just being real. Oh, I wasn't even asking, but hey, mashallah. Like it was but no, I appreciate you guys sharing that. But we can agree that the majority of hands did not go up, right? How many of you would say you power your way through the day with coffee? Yeah, right? Some of you, mashallah, good sleep and powering through coffee. Good, man, this optimal functioning. No, but what I'm saying is it's so interesting. It's so interesting that often the basics, we neglect them, and then we wonder why we struggle. But then struggle becomes normal. I've met many people who can't imagine going through a day without anxiety. And we're not talking about like a diagnosis. That's different. But like just generally living in a life on edge all the time. They can't imagine it. When you tell them that like, I was just sitting this morning and I was reflecting, they're like, how do you do that? Like, where do you find the time? They're like, the moment I wake up, run, brush my teeth, Why do you have to run? Well, I woke up a little late. Oh, why'd you wake up late? Yeah, I slept a little late. Like, give yourselves a chance. Seriously. See, I remember I teach a private class, and I'm really strict with the students about like sleeping early so that you can wake up on time and be on time for class and all that. One student, they joined the class, and after a while, they started to try to apply those rules, like sleeping on time and waking up early and really trying to stay focused and disciplined and, cutting out unnecessary things, realizing that we don't need to keep up with every single new show. Do you understand what I'm talking about here? How many of you are behind on some show? Yeah? How many of you have a list of shows to catch up on? Yeah. Like we have fear of missing out. I need to watch every show that's out there. You can't. With everything else you have in your life, it's highly unlikely you can fit all that in. And a social life, and a healthy lifestyle, and eat well, and sleep well. Do you understand? But we try to cram it all in. So this student told me afterward, they were like, man, this is what it's like when you like live responsibly? Like literally, they're like, wow, if I sleep on time and I wake up on like a normal, man, I'm actually pretty functional. Like I've never felt this way. To them, it was normal all through their undergrad. Sleep like 3 hours, 4 hours, power through with coffee, feel anxious about everything coming up. Initially, you're like surprised. It's a bit strange to feel that way, but then you get used to it. You can't imagine what it's like to be healthy. Some of us have never given ourselves that chance. Now the question becomes how, right? And I think last week it was, or the week before, I mentioned this idea of if you calculate how many years you have or how many weeks in life you have if you live 80 years. If you live 80 years in your life, you have about 4,000 weeks. 4,000. And if you've now reached 40, then you have only 2,000 left. You cannot possibly do everything. You cannot watch every show and every movie and listen to every song. And this is not a comment on whether or not it's halal or not. It's just stating based on what's our reality. You can't do that. And then you can't keep up with every single friend's every detail of their life. You can't. I respect y'all for trying, but you can't. And we know that. Like, there's an infinite, like not infinite, but there's an incredibly high number of things that people do and things happening around us. We can't possibly keep up with everything. So then what do you do then? Well, you have to prioritize. What's important to me in life that I cannot possibly sacrifice? Put that at the top. And like this, prioritize what you're going to give your time to. Yeah, but I'm going to miss out on all these things. Yes, you will. but you're immortal. You're not immortal. You're a mortal human being that will pass away. Accept that and accordingly plan your life. Do you understand? That's a hard decision to make. Some basics. What's our nutrition like? What's your sleep like? What's your physical activity like? Right? What are your stress levels like? These are basics. And honestly, if we don't address these, everything else is like extra. Seriously. Are you getting that sunlight first thing in the morning to set your circadian rhythm? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just get enough sleep. Let's start with that. Don't worry about the sunlight first thing. Are you drinking water with electrolytes? Don't worry about it. Just wake up, normal timings, sleep early. Just do that. Should I do HIIT or should I do just go for a walk? Do something for 20 minutes. No, seriously. These things will make profound differences in your well-being throughout the day. So if you combine making changes at a basic fundamental level, these basic functions of human beings, if you make changes there, and then you begin to cut out things that are just not your highest priority, you're going to notice you have a lot more time. You'll have a lot more time to do things that are meaningful. I'm not asking, look, wallahi, I'm not asking anybody to be any less ambitious. Seriously. If you can maintain your ambition and drive yourself and push yourself behind things that you believe in are meaningful, important to you, whilst not losing sight of your spirituality, which should be part of the meaningful things to you, go for it. Go for it. Sadly, for many of us, if we're just honest, we get so caught up in trying to do everything, jump through every hoop, that spirituality becomes an afterthought. And then if we have time, we kind of, maybe some people even feel guilty attending halaqah. Man, I could be doing work. I could be studying. I could be working on my side business. Like, you can. You feel guilty going to family dinners because I could be working on my... Brother, when do you live? When do you live? I recently posted one quote. I want to share it here. The modern human being. Too alive to die and too dead to live. What do I mean by that? The difference between being alive and living. Someone could be in a vegetative state, and we would say they are alive, but they're not living life. That's not any type of judgment. It's just a fact. Somebody, imagine, somebody who's you open up social media and you see them posting pictures from somewhere in Europe, and then they're just traveling to all these countries, and you're like, what? They're living life. What do we mean? What, were they dead before? What do we mean they're living life? They're enjoying, but you could enjoy it at home too, but what's different? Yeah? Doing things that are meaningful and pursuing dreams that maybe previously they just never did for whatever reason. They're trying to squeeze life out of life. Have any of you read Henry David Thoreau? Thoreau talks about this idea of going to live in the woods. And he says, I did that so that I don't reach the end of life and realize that I have not lived. He says, my goal was to come face to face with the essentials and most meaningful things in life. When you're in the city, you're just surrounded by so many distractions. He said for 2 years he lived out in the woods, and his whole thing was, let me figure out what's important. Let me cut out the things that are not important. And sometimes we need to do that. Cut out certain things that we realize are just not important to us. A lot of us will turn down invitations because of what? Because of an exam. Because of work. What if we turn down some of our hobbies, the ones that are just extra, to be with our loved ones, to go spend some time in the masjid? No, like to really, and this is really a call for all of us to sit down and ask ourselves what our values are, and accordingly live lives in accordance with your values. If someone says, what's the simplest way to not live a life of regret? Live a life in accordance with your values. If you do that, any decision you make in accordance with your values, even if it doesn't work out, you won't beat yourself up about it. At the end of the day, it was in line with your values. And that's where we have to operate from. Now, one of the most courageous things, but terrifying things we can do, is take an honest look at ourselves. How many of you would agree with that? It's one of the most courageous things, right? It's terrifying to look at yourself and just acknowledge what you see, not with judgment. There has to be compassion. Not shaming yourself, but also not shying away from what we see. An assessment. If I were to continue this way for 10 years, would I be happy? Who am I becoming on a daily basis? Not what am I doing. Who am I becoming? Who am I becoming? Because you could keep doing something, but are you really gaining clarity about what's important to you? Are you really living a life where you're prioritizing those things that are actually important? And if not, you're setting yourself up for regret. Where down the line you look back and say, I wish I had spent more time with my grandma. I wish I had given more time to that. I wish I hadn't been so extreme when it came to my work for a company that didn't even care about me. Gave the promotion to somebody else. Do you get what I'm saying? This is hard. But remember, taking an honest look at ourselves is one of the most rewarding things we can do. Honestly, it's one of the most rewarding things. When we acknowledge, and this is a long topic, there's so much to explore here, because once you look and you acknowledge certain things, it hurts. And you might feel like you let yourself down. It's a common conversation I have with people, right? Where when they start taking an honest look at themselves, they go, man, I'm 31. This is not where I thought I was going to be at 31. And they feel like, man, I let myself down. Do you get it? Like I always saw myself to be somebody else by this age. And that's not who I am. But there's always hope. Unless and only when we take that honest look at ourselves can we begin to acknowledge where work is needed and start to take steps towards it. Until then, we keep it in the shadows. And we keep on going through life like it doesn't exist. Remember, you don't get to where you want to be in life by convincing yourself that you're already there. You don't get to where you want to be in life by convincing yourself that you're already there. Because you know that you're not there deep down. And you're lying to yourself and everybody around you, covering it up. You're better off admitting, you know what? I have a lot of work to do. And that's okay. That's where compassion comes in. It's okay. No one expects you to be perfect. You made mistakes? That's fine. Did you learn from those mistakes? That's what's important. Not did you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The question is, did you learn from them? To correct them moving forward. Does that make sense? Look, people can go through different experiences in life. It doesn't mean you learn from the experiences. You learn from experiences when you reflect on them. You sit back and say, wait, what went wrong? And how do I prevent it from going wrong again? What steps am I going to take? That's always my question. When someone comes and said, Shaykh, this went wrong. Okay, I feel your pain. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Tell me. How are we going to make sure it doesn't happen again so you don't have to experience this pain again? Let's learn from our past so that we don't repeat it in the future. Do you understand? So I want to read a few quotes to you, and you can think about these. One author, he writes, "There are books to read, landscapes to be walked, friends to be with, life to be fully lived. This new epidemic of distraction is our civilization's specific weakness. And its threat is not so much to our minds, even as they shape-shift under the pressure. The threat is to our souls. At this rate, if the noise does not relent, we might even forget we have any souls." Do you understand? Our souls become the last priority. If we get time, we'll do some soul work. You know, we talk about self-care. What about soul care on a daily basis? What are we doing for that? It's from the same book, another quote. The author says, how do we have any kind of spiritual life at all if we can't pay attention longer than a goldfish? Do you know what he's talking about? The author's talking about our attention span. At one point, our attention span used to be average 12 seconds. And now it's come down to 8 seconds. A goldfish attention span is 9 seconds. That's what he's saying. He's like, how are you going to have any kind of spiritual life, concentration in your prayer, if you can't pay attention longer than a goldfish? He goes, how do you pray, read the Quran, sit under a teaching or at a class in the masjid, when every chance you get, you reach for the dopamine dispenser that is your phone? I love that. Dopamine dispenser. It's like a digital pharmacy, right? Dopamine dispenser. SubhanAllah. It's a real question. And so, this is something to think about, guys, is how busy are we? There's a difference between being busy and getting things done. There's a difference. Anyone who has studied in a friend circle knows that. You know when you sit with friends to study, and you spend 8 hours. I was studying for 8 hours. No. You were sitting in a friend circle with the intention of studying for 8 hours? Absolutely. How much studying did you get done? An hour and a half, right? The rest of the time was what? Where are we ordering from? Are we getting boba? Gossip about other stuff? Showing highlights and, TikToks to each other. Did you see this? That's 8 hours. And so we have to ask ourselves, throughout our days, where is our time going? It's not just, guys, it's not just that time is not being utilized properly. It's that the things we're doing with our time are shaping the way we focus, our ability to focus, our ability to pay attention. And that should be concerning. Because even when we have that moment and we put our phone down and I'm going to be present with this person, a part of us is itching to check. Any more notifications? How are we present? How are we focused on the prayer? Do you understand? So this keeping up, you cannot keep up with everything that's new, every new video. You can't. And so the smartest thing to do is accept that and begin to say, I'm going to focus on what's important. What are those friendships that I really want to cultivate and invest in those friendships? Do you get what I'm saying? What are those things in my life that are so important that I need to invest in, that are not going to be an afterthought anymore? to get it. And we have to take steps for that. One of my teachers used to say this. He used to say that our whole lives, we sacrifice our health to make money, only at the end to take that money and put it back in to manage our health and try to deal with our poor health. All our money goes into surgeries. All our money goes into medication and this and that. Why? Because we sacrificed our health to earn that money. Like, what a cycle. What about the individual who along the way says, I'm going to prioritize my health? We spend our whole lives neglecting God. We don't have that relationship with Him. The time comes, we want to turn to Him, but we haven't invested. And that's where balance becomes what's important. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about reflection, because that's the topic for today. Does anyone have any thoughts on what we talked about? Just any thoughts on hurriedness and busyness and anything? I'd love to hear from you guys. You're going to have to shout it out, but... Anyone? That's beautiful, beautiful. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, for those of you who didn't hear, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ مِنْ عَجَلٍ. Human beings have been created hasty. سَأُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِي. And soon I will show you my signs. And when I do, فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ. Don't be hasty about them. That's beautiful. Jazakumullah khair for sharing that. Absolutely. That's very in line with what I'm going to talk about. I love it. Yeah. That's beautiful. No, absolutely. He's saying that if we lack mindfulness in our prayer and focus in our prayer, then we tend to be really kind of not present throughout the rest of the day as well. Prayer is a perfect opportunity to become and have a few moments of mindfulness. Mindfulness means I'm here in the moment. I'm present with whatever's in front of me. I'm not thinking about the past and not about I'm here right now. I mean, there's a lot of research now that speaks about the benefits of mindfulness in general. But for the believer, prayer could be that moment of mindfulness. We pray because we are servants of Allah. We pray because that is our duty to Allah. But mindfulness, being present, is part of what is desired in prayer. And then it benefits us throughout the rest of the day. Because in those moments, we also are able to be more present. Right? And there's just so much to say about that. Any last thoughts here? Yeah.
About the sky bring about this like here you say I would be saying he talks about like how bad habit and they did it. And I think all the problems that you thought they already go. I think portion of this book started out like the confidence system that based on unsustainable object. He talked about how really it like create unsustainable. And I guess in the world we are able to better understand and say a sustainable model by then this is that want to increase profit. And then they look at the brain and how the brain operates. And they experiment to exploit the budget center of your brain. And they design products basically based on how to exploit this budget center best. So I guess what we're using or the exact things that we enjoy about the products, to the markets about. That's exactly decided so they can target it by the sector. And I guess that's a way to stay away from that unsustainable popular small the person.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a lot of choices that we can make. And so what you're describing is that, there is a model that's designed to push you to live a very unhealthy lifestyle. Work overtime, work extra, be available after hours. You know, keep your work phone on you. And by the way, we have our quarterly workshop on mental health, so you can't say we don't care about you, right? Like, what? Quarterly workshop on mental health? Manage your stress better? But that gives us the permission to now dump stressful stuff on you? Like, ajib. It's just a box you check, right? No, like, really serious, caring for the well-being of employees. That's a very rare thing to find. And that's where now we have to make more conscious decisions about what we want. Do we want something that, may make us an extra certain amount of money, but man, at what cost? At our well-being? At our anxiety? Our peace? Like, at what cost? And that's why, again, where it comes back to, we have choices we get to make. We accept certain jobs. We decide certain things. And again, my first thing would not be to go and tackle your job. If you're feeling overwhelmed, my first thing would not be, well, let's look at how many hours you're working. That wouldn't be my first thing. My first thing would be what are all the extra things that you're doing that are just not healthy? And for a lot of us, there would be quite a few there. Our habits, our just mental hygiene, emotional hygiene. We keep up with everybody's gossip. Why? Why? It is a blessing to not hear it. I mean, there's a reason why we're not supposed to backbite. It tears apart societies, but it spares you the rage that you feel because he did that to her. It has nothing to do with you. And I'm not trying to say don't care about people. I'm saying, but let's be real. That's not what you need always. Right? It's interesting how much we desire to know things that have nothing to do with us. Like, share the tea, spill that tea. I need to know. It has nothing to do with you. That's happening all the way over there in Whitby. Nothing to do with you. You live in Mississauga. No, but I want to know. Right? I need to know. Why? And then we get worked up listening to the story. We have choices to make, guys. Seriously. Some of us are so particular about, the ingredients in our shampoo. So we have a filter, I want to be careful. What about what you let into your heart? Into your mind? Do you know anybody like this, by the way? Show of hands. How many of you know someone who, when someone brings something up that's not related to them, they're like, I don't want to hear it. I'm good. Anyone know people like that? They're like, I'm good. And it's amazing. It's amazing. You're some of us are how do you do that? Teach me how you could just be no, I don't want to hear all that juicy gossip. Right? Haven't you seen people in comment sections go off? I need to know what happened at the end of this. Dude, it's a comment, it's a video, it's a skit. I need to know what happens. Why? SubhanAllah. We have limited span, attention span. We have limited memory. We have limited all these things directed towards what's important. And if you don't, shaitan will give you 100 things to occupy yourself with. And SubhanAllah, the progress that you want to make is often found in cutting out those things that are weighing you down. Not in doing more, because you're already stretched thin. So doing more is not going to get you further. It's cutting out the things that are weighing you down. Yeah.
how do you, I don't think like that, where like, you get me afraid. It's still like, it's still there. Instagram going down. I deleted Instagram, but I thought we like, always that action comes.
You're right. No, he's right. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I'm sure we all know someone who makes their appearances on Instagram from time to time randomly, right? Like, oh, they're back. No, I know what you're saying. And they're trying. Respect to them. They're trying to like cut it out, keep a distance. But oftentimes we don't address the root of the problem. We're just dealing with the symptoms. We're just dealing with the symptoms. We're not getting to the root of why we fall prey to anything that can offer us an, you know, like dopamine or like anything that can get us hooked. Because there are people who don't. They're very responsible in their usage. They're very intentional in their usage. And so there's no doubt they're designed to try to hook you in. But at a certain level, we choose to engage. If it's ignorance, we need to educate ourselves. Like, how are these apps trying to hook us in? That's one. The second is to recognize, wait, what do I want from this? Oh, this could be a whole conversation. I don't want to go off on this because today's been pretty unhinged already, but procrastination. Why do we procrastinate? For the longest time, the theory was that we procrastinate because we just don't have self-discipline. The most modern research now is that actually we procrastinate because we haven't learned to tolerate uncomfortable emotions. Emotions like boredom, emotions like the stress of doing something that's, cognitively burdensome. So rather, just thinking about how much work it's going to take to get this assignment done is like, oh my God. And so we try to balance that discomfort with dopamine. We often try to balance that discomfort with dopamine because that negative emotion now makes us feel very uncomfortable, of course. But then we want to, regain equilibrium. So we turn to dopamine hits to kind of give us that. But then you waste your time. Then you feel guilty about that. So I'm going to go back and think about how much work I know. And the cycle repeats. So the solution is not just cutting out the dopamine. It's recognizing that, wait, I need to become more comfortable with uncomfortable emotions. The discomfort of boredom, the discomfort of cognitive load. Okay. Do you understand that? That's part of what we need to think about. And then you could look into the work of Gabor Mate when it comes to addictions. Mate talks about how we pin addictions as the problem. He says, no, addictions are what people turn to deal with their pain and shame. We turn to addictions. We turn to these things to help us deal with our pain and our shame. But because we keep turning to them, whatever those things are, those outlets, we keep turning to them and they're not a healthy coping mechanism, we become addicted. And everyone notices the addiction and says, this is a problem. Wait, why do they turn to it? Address that. And that's been his goal through most of his work, is to draw people's attention away from the symptom towards the root problem here. And that's another question to ask. Why do I turn to this dopamine dispenser all the time? What am I running away from? What am I running away from? And that's a long discussion, but khair. Let's move towards reflection, inshallah. So there's a really good book on this topic if you want to read on the topic of reflection and contemplation. The Arabic word for this is tafakkur. It's written by Malik Badri. Malik Badri was really a pioneer in the Islamic psychology, on the Islamic psychology scene Within the last few years, he passed away. And he's really kind of inspired this generation now that we're seeing of Muslims who are in the mental health field and attempting now not just to be psychologists who are Muslims, but to be psychologists who are engaging in Islamic psychology, where the whole framework is Islamic. And Malik Bedri was one of those pioneers to push this. So Bedri, in his work on contemplation, he mentions how, look, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, has established the idea that people have beliefs, and those beliefs lead to certain patterns of thought, which trigger certain thoughts in particular, which then affect our emotions, which then lead to our behaviors. And there's like this line of reasoning. And so he says cognitive behavioral therapy really is focused on trying to address the core beliefs and the cognitive distortions that lie there. But he uses that point to argue that, well, if you can change your beliefs, it'll change your thoughts. If you change your thoughts, it'll change your emotions. If it changes your emotions, it'll change your behaviors. It's the power of belief. And one of the ways that we, or therapists try to work with people using the modality of CBT is starting with self-awareness, just becoming aware of what you do, your behaviors, and then noticing the immediate thoughts you have in those moments. Something happens. Okay, what's the first thought you had? Note it down. How did you feel in that moment? Note it down. And then working back from that. And really, number one, getting them to see things from a different perspective, realizing the flaws or the deficiencies in their reasoning. And subhanAllah, subsequently, it changes a lot of people's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It's one of the most widespread, used modalities, CBT. And it has its limitations, but it's very widely used. He makes the argument that imagine as Muslims, if we engaged in reflection, in contemplation, that would shape our beliefs, that would then shape the way we think about things, that would then shape the way we feel when we see or experience things, that would then shape our behaviors. And he says, and he uses this to argue that we have not realized how powerful reflection and contemplation are. It has always been encouraged in our Islamic tradition. In the Quran, Allah Ta'ala speaks about reflection all the time. Allah Ta'ala says in Surah 2, Ali Imran, a very well-known verse, that indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ, in the changing of the night into day and vice versa, لَآيَاتٍ, there are signs for people of reason, of intellect, understanding, لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Who are these people? The ones who remember Allah standing, sitting, lying down. And who are these people? وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. They reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. What conclusion do they reach? They reach the conclusion, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Their reflection leads them to Rabbana, to their Lord. And they say, Ya Allah, you did not create all of this in vain. And so, it's a matter of perspective. See, reflection is what? The scholars, when they try to define reflection, let me first give you the APA definition. So you start to realize there's deficiencies. The APA, the American Psychological Association, when they define contemplation or reflection, they say the examination, the contemplation, and the analysis of one's thoughts, feelings, and actions. Do you see a problem with that? A problem in the sense of, is that what Allah is talking about? Is that it? That's deficient. It's missing out on so much. What's it missing out on? Give me some examples. Yeah, examining your beliefs. Yeah, what else? Everything's about you. Have you noticed that? Your thoughts and feelings and actions. When Allah speaks about reflection, contemplation, what's He talking about? Just you? Everything around you. I mean, it's very humanistic, right? The APA's definition is very humanistic in nature. But our definition would be what? Much broader. To reflect not only on yourself, absolutely reflect on yourself. Reflect on the creation around you. Reflect on Allah's blessings to you. Reflect on the fact that Allah sees you and hears you. Reflect on your shortcomings. Reflect on the temporality of this life. Reflect on the inevitability of death. Reflect on the idea of what it means to be a good person, a virtuous person. And these are a lot of different things to think about. And every one of them will give us a certain benefit. So if we're talking about reflecting on Allah's creation, what would be the goal? What do you hope to accomplish by traveling out to Banff? What do you hope to accomplish? Besides eat the bagels at the top or something. Yeah. It increases your knowledge of Allah's attributes, of His names. You begin at an experiential level. You feel in awe of God. Looking at His creation as a sign that if this is how magnificent the creation is, Ya Allah, how great are you? All right, that's the goal. Looking at a sunset, a sunrise, looking at the moon, right? SubhanAllah. What about blessings? What's your goal behind reflecting on Allah's blessings? You're sitting there and you're reflecting. And this is pretty much a gratitude practice right here. Every day to sit down and say, what blessings am I enjoying? What's the goal? When you think about how much someone has done for you, what does that do for you towards them? It builds your love for them, your appreciation for them, right? Even that's a beautiful thing, to reflect on the blessing of having people in your life. From time to time to reach out to them, just to let them know, hey, I appreciate having you in my life. You know, I'm thankful to Allah that He let our paths cross. Seriously. It can go a long way for people. And so reflecting on His blessings. And you could spend every day, every time doing just this. Because Allah says in the Quran, if you reflect and try to count my blessings, you just never realize. You'll just never be able to encompass them. And so what are some examples of blessings? Broadly speaking. Give me like categories of blessings that Allah has given us. Health. Yeah, that's a whole deep category. No, seriously, right? Like, when's the last time I said, Ya Allah, thank you for a healthy Achilles tendon? No, like, I'm just being real. No, seriously. I haven't done it. But the day my Achilles, God forbid, la samah Allah, goes down, man, my whole life revolves around my Achilles all of a sudden. Seriously. Health, that's huge, right? We take it for granted until we see those who don't have what we have. SubhanAllah. Health is not just physical health, mental health. Seriously, man, like, if you've ever spoken to somebody who just can't even trust themselves, they have so much waswasa, they can't even trust themselves. We forget our grip on reality is a blessing. Imagine you couldn't get a grip on reality where you're like, I don't know if that water is halal. Like, I don't know. I don't know if even I'm being honest in my assessment of you. I don't know if my prayer counts. I don't know if I should be here. I don't know what my intention is for being here. Do you know how difficult life could be? And if you've not been diagnosed or have to deal with that, wallahi, every single day, alhamdulillah, we are blessed. We take these basic things for granted. How many of you have read about Helen Keller? Just a reminder of the blessings of Allah. Read Helen Keller, her biography. Yeah. What are other categories of blessings we could think about? Wealth. Wealth. Whatever it is, you may not be happy with where you are, but whatever you have, that's a blessing. All right? Someone was just telling me that yesterday, with the weather, they got a call from their son. Their son was like, "Dad, guess what?" And they're so excited. And the dad's like, "What happened?" It's like, "Guess what? The electricity went out." And he's so excited to like experience electricity going out. And it's all dark. And then the dad gets home and the son's like sad. "What happened?" "Well, electricity came back." I'm like, first world problems. Like, you know what I mean? Like, other part of the world, people are like, "Man, why is electricity going out?" And here, kids are like, "It's so fun when it goes out. We pull out the candles and we sit around and subhanallah." Right? So just make shukr, man, that if the lights are on, wallahi. What other category of blessings? Relationships. Too often this goes overlooked. The people we have in our lives. If you have people that care for you, wallahi, that's huge. Seriously, that's huge. To be grateful to Allah for that and to them for that. It's a huge investment. We neglect it so often. Work becomes a priority and school becomes a priority and the relationships get neglected. And then when things go hard, we come to them. That's not fair. They don't just deserve stressed out us. They deserve us at our best too. Right? What about our spiritual blessings? Just the fact that Allah has given us tawfiq to know Him, to recognize Him. Without that, where would I be? Where would you be? And maybe some of us can think of a period in our lives where we didn't pray. We were not connected to Allah. What was your life like? What was it like? What were you doing? And here you are today. And no, you're not a perfect Muslim, and that's okay. But man, you at least have a direction. You at least have some answers to those existential questions of life. That's a blessing. Right? That's a blessing. If Allah surrounded you with a masjid, how many of you have traveled somewhere where there was no masjid nearby? Yeah. You don't have to go far. You don't have to go far. We are blessed to have access to a facility like this. Seriously. People move away from here and they long for it. They're like, "Man, I miss it." But for us, it's just the normal. It's my local masjid. No, alhamdulillah, I'm grateful to show up and see people here and young people and have access to imams and, different programs and international speakers come in. Like, it's not everywhere like this. Just gratitude. And imagine you start your day with this, setting the tone for the rest of the day. Waking up in the morning and say, "Today I'm going to meet so-and-so. Alhamdulillah, I look forward to it. Today I get to do this. Today I get to go for a walk." And I'll share this quote. I might have shared it before, but it always kind of plays in my head. 20 years from now, you would give anything to be as old as you are today. 20 years from now, you would give anything to be as old as you are today. So don't waste the moment. Don't waste the moment, right? Reflecting on Allah's blessings, reflecting on His awareness of us. He sees me. He sees and He hears me. He protects me. What does that make you feel? Maybe a healthy guilt, hopefully. Maybe it's a healthy guilt. Ideally, it'd be a healthy guilt, not an unhealthy level of guilt. A healthy guilt about what? Man, all those times I sinned and he was watching me. What about reflecting on your shortcomings? Instills like a sense of fear of, I don't want to repeat those mistakes. I made some mistakes and I don't want to make them again. When you start to reflect on how temporary this dunya is, and that's why we're encouraged to come for janazas and stuff, and go to the graveyard, is it's a reminder. And then we don't become so attached to things. Then a glass breaking is not the end of the world. Do you understand? It's just part of life. You don't actually cry over spilt milk. Do you understand? The inevitability of death. What will that do for you? Well, that will hopefully instill within you this encouragement to prepare for death. To ask yourself, am I living in a way that I won't regret when I pass away? You understand? Like, it's a moment to step back. Virtue. You can reflect on virtue. In what sense? To sit down and say, what kind of a person am I? Who do I want to be? And that's where we should study, example, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, his characteristics. Because when you find out how he was, you're like, man. Recently, someone came to me and they were talking about some dispute in the house. They're like, I don't know what to do. That's what they said to me. I don't know what to do. Sheikh, what should I do? I'm really confused. And I just asked them one simple question. I said, what would the Prophet do? What would the Prophet do? Imagine we asked ourselves that question more often. In this relationship, in this dispute I have where like, I'm not saying sorry, they're like, I'm not saying sorry. To ask yourself, wait, what would the Prophet ﷺ do in this situation? How much would we transform just by answering that question honestly and acting? We would be very different people. What if we look around at the people around us and reflect on their good qualities? You know, so-and-so, that's my friend. Man, they are so generous. I need to become more generous. And now you begin to make intentions. You know, so-and-so, they're always there for me. Man, I should be there for them. I realize I never asked them how they're doing. And you start to reflect on the good in the people around you and say, well, I want to take that good from them too. But we need to notice these things. To notice these things, we need to take out time to reflect. And to do that, we cannot be rushing through life. Do you understand? And so, I'm going to finish now, inshallah, with just some strategies of what we could do to become more reflective. I had a lot here that I could have shared, but we only have about 5 more minutes, inshallah. So, the first strategy that I think is very useful, and it's a teaching in our religion. What would the Prophet, first when we think about the Prophet ﷺ at the very beginning, before he received revelation, what would he do? He would be in solitude. He would go to the cave of Hira and sit alone and reflect. And then after he received revelation, every single year during Ramadan, he would take out 10 days to do what? I'tikaf, which translates as a spiritual retreat, an isolation. You stay in the masjid all day. You're not meant to be talking too much. You're definitely not meant to be keeping up with what's happening everywhere around the world. You're meant to be focused on your relationship with Allah, reflective. What does that tell us? There's immense value in taking out time to go into isolation, to be alone, to not engage in conversations, truly be alone and reflect. And that could just be coming to the masjid early, maybe half an hour early, just to sit alone in the masjid and reflect. Your daily 10-minute reflection, 15-minute reflection. Renew your intention for the day. Reflect on what you want to do, how your day's going, how you want it to go in the rest of the day. Now seriously, when you're driving somewhere, see, subhanAllah, what do we do with our time? Any little empty moments we have, what do? We fill them. We fill them, isn't it? Anyone drive in silence? Yeah. The rest of you are like, Look at these weirdos, right? Like, silence. What are you, like, psycho? Like, just driving around, like, looking around? No, like, or sometimes we just put on earphones everywhere we go. Like, we just can't walk in silence. We don't know what to do with ourselves. And I think I mentioned it before, but it's a really scary but sobering thought. One scholar, he mentioned that the extent to which we are comfortable being alone in this world will be the extent to which we are comfortable with the solitude of our graves. It's a scary one, right? A place of solitude is not a place of isolation or loneliness. That's not the idea. The idea is not to go there and to feel just disconnected from everybody. Rather, you're meant to go there and feel connected to Allah. The idea is not just detachment and disconnection from everybody. Like in the last 10 days of Ramadan in i'tikaf, what's the goal? It's not just we get away from everybody. It's like, that's not the goal. Yeah, you get away from everybody to do what? To connect with Allah. That's really what our spiritual retreat, our daily time spent in solitude is meant to be about. Because isolation and loneliness is all about who you're trying to escape. Solitude, healthy solitude, is about who you're with. You're alone with Allah. And so loneliness is like an inner emptiness. Solitude is inner fulfillment. And so if it's true that the problem is more our absence than Allah's, more about our distraction than Allah's being disconnected from us, then the solution is fairly simple. Create an environment for attention and connection to God. Do you understand that? Is Allah present watching us? Yes. Are we paying attention to Him often? No. So the problem is us, not God. Is He not devoted His attention to us? He has. We're just distracted from Him. And so we need to cultivate environments where we can pay attention to Him and be connected to Him. Do you understand? Some distinguish between external silence and internal silence. Like you can silence the world around you by getting away from everybody, being alone. But what about the internal silence? Where you're not still thinking about this and that and that. And so that's something to think about. There's a really interesting article that I would recommend here. It's called I Used to Be a Human Being. The writer is a questionable writer, but the article is pretty good. It's called I Used to Be a Human Being. Okay, number 2, our next strategy would be our daily prayers. There's this idea that human beings have an infinite desire for a finite world. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us that if the child of Adam was given one valley of gold, that the child of Adam would want a second valley. There's never enough for a person who's not content. So humans have an potentially infinite desire for a finite world. What will that lead to then? Chasing behind something that you'll never attain. Ultimately, nothing in this life apart from God can satisfy our desires. And tragically, we continue to chase after our desires ad infinitum. And so what's the result? A chronic state of restlessness, or worse, angst, anger, anxiety, disillusionment, depression, all of which lead to a life of hurry, a life of busyness, overload, shopping, materialism, careerism, a life of more, which in turn makes us even more restless, and the cycle spirals out of control. Advertising is literally an attempt to monetize our restlessness. Doesn't that kind of describe the lives we live? Because that's another whole conversation. The amount of ads we're exposed to. The amount of ads that we are exposed to everywhere. Even like YouTube videos. Like you get 2 now every single time. Like, and I know you guys are like, Sheikh, you don't have YouTube Premium? Like, bro, you know? It is what it is, right? The third is simplicity. We often complain about a lack of time. And here's the point. The solution, here's the thing, right? Have you ever said this? I wish I had more time in my day. The argument it made is, you know what you would do with that extra time? You would cram it with more work. And so you'd still be spread thin, you'd still be hurrying. The solution to an overbusy life is not more time. It's to slow down and simplify our lives around what really matters. And until we don't do that, no matter how much time we add, we're just going to keep adding stuff to do. And because we're convinced we're human doings and not human beings. And just do. We don't even know what it means to be now. Right? Like if you just have a day where you have nothing to do, what are you going to do with yourself? Like, I don't know. Like, for some of us, that's the worst thing that could happen. What am I going to do with all this time? It's like, there's so much you could do. It's not about doing, like, things of the world and just chasing after things, but things that are genuinely fulfilling. And so the final thing I'll say here is to set a daily, non-negotiable bare minimum of contemplation that we want to do. I mentioned some of the topics, right? Reflecting on what? People say, what do I want to reflect on? Well, reflect on Allah's creation. If you can't do it at home, go somewhere. Go to a beautiful park and sit and reflect. Think about wow. One of the ways to reflect is to realize the contingent and arbitrary nature of things. You begin to appreciate how things are when you reflect on how they could have been otherwise, in ways that you might not have been so happy. So we take for granted things. Of course things are going to be this way. What do you mean? They could be many other ways, but they're not. Be grateful for that. And so, nature, reflecting on your blessings, that's so powerful. Reflecting on who you're becoming, reflecting on how short life is. I know it's scary, but it's a reality. Reflecting on death, whether or not I'm preparing for it, whether or not I'm really, living a life where I'm in line with the art of dying. It's a whole art. So to set a certain amount of time, not when I have time, but I'll take out this time, 5 minutes. It could be when you're driving, seriously. Even just when you're driving to reflect on something. Because when you're driving, you're stuck, right? So kind of have to be in the seat. Reflecting upon what we talked about. May Allah Ta'ala grant us tawfiq to be people who are more intentional with our lives. People who are people of meaning and purpose, intentionality. People who realize what to prioritize before we pass away. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallama wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair to everybody for coming out. I appreciate you guys always. Those of you sharing your thoughts, I appreciate that. We'll continue inshallah next week. Currently I'm going to be in the hub next door. You're most welcome to come over, grab some drinks. I think they have some new drinks and concoctions that they have, so try them out. If you have any questions, I'll take your questions there inshallah. All right, Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.